until October, the 200-odd men at Tangalooma cut and process the huge humpback whales, which are caught just a few miles away in the blue Pacific. When the day's catch has been taken, the chaser slowly heads towards Cape Moreton, back to the busy little spot at Tangalooma where the real job of work has to be done, the flensing and lemming, the cooking and separating. Tangalooma Station is virtually a miniature township with its modern factory buildings, workshops, canteen, living quarters and bungalow, offices and administration buildings. At the foot of the slipway, the hawser is replaced by a 4 3/4-inch steel cable for the long drag up the slipway to the deck. A constant spray of water is played onto the timber to facilitate easy sliding of the enormous carcass.
This is the Tangalooma Whaling Station. It was the largest shore-based whaling station in the entire southern hemisphere. You know, and it was amazing that they actually caught and processed over 6,000 whales right here. They'd have great big winches here in place. They'd use steel hawsers. They'd actually attach them to the whale's skull, drag them up here. A team of flensers would basically take just over an hour to cut the whale up entirely. The very first thing is they would pull the blubber off the whale. They'd cut the blubber up into Bible pieces, which were about 300 to 400 millimetre square pieces. They'd actually put those in the boilers. It was really quite an amazing place, and you could smell it from like about 5 miles away. You know, it's quite lucky. They were pretty much the, besides lighthouse keepers, they were the only people on Moreton Island in the 50s and 60s.
Moreton Island is around about 30 kilometres away from Brisbane. It's a beautiful place. The water is beautiful and pristine, and it's like the island is pretty much untouched.
Well, the humpback whales pass by here every year between June and October, so that's when our whale watch season is on. It's a great place. It's nice and sheltered inside the bay, so usually nice calm waters, and a beautiful spot to see the humpback whales.
During the season, upwards of 600 whales pass any given point off Moreton Island in daylight every day.
Today we're going to be taking the same path as the whalers once did, but instead of hunting them, we're going to be going out and watching them today and having a good time with them.
Started back in 1996 was when they first started whale watching. Back then it was a lot harder to find the whales. Even just seeing one whale was a very big surprise and a very good thing to see. They used to actually have planes out here to try and find them. Nowadays it's very easy. It's pretty much guaranteed every time to see whales.
We are very lucky to have all this amazing wildlife around, like the dolphins and the whales, and plenty of other animals as well that we can show people.
So first of all, in Antarctica is their best feeding grounds. Down there there's a lot of krill. They can really sustain a population, but it's just too cold to have a calf down there. So they travel up north, come to the warmer places up here, up in the Northern Great Barrier Reef as well, and they'll have their calves and mate up here.
Towards the end of the season, like September, October, is when we start seeing the mothers with the young calves coming back from the breeding grounds. They tend to be very playful and very active, so that's probably my favourite part of the season. Having said that, in June, July, you get some of the boisterous males coming through. They can be very active as well, so there's always something to see. There's always different things, and that's what keeps it interesting.
Now the lookout is back at his post, with the helmsman standing by. Members of the crew set about reloading the gun. First, a rope is spliced to the harpoon and loaded into the muzzle of the gun. Then the time fuse, and lastly the grenade with its 2 pounds of gunpowder.
The first whales were actually taken off Cape Moreton next to Flinders Reef in 1952. And it basically was that the guys actually all went on board the whaler, found the whales. Captain would run up and basically shoot the harpoon into the whale as it got closer to the ship. Actually inject compressed air into the whale to make sure that it would float so that they wouldn't lose it on the way back. They'd drag them all the way back to Tangalooma, where they'd actually anchor them until the whaling station would be able to process them. Then they'd drag them up onto the whaling station and start blending them. The whale was used from everything from blood and bone fertiliser. All of the whale oil was boiled down by pressure cooker, to get the oil out of the blubber. That was used for margarine, light oil machinery. Even the mouthpieces called the baleen plates were actually used in women's fashions. The only thing that was actually wasted from processing the whale was the whale itself.
We're this beautiful family resort and we take people out whale watching and we care about the animals and we want to share that with the guests that we're taking out there to show them how magnificent these creatures are. So we've really come full circle, I guess. Well, the great thing about the humpback whales is that they are very inquisitive and very curious animals. So quite often they will actually come right up to us. Today we've got this beautiful juvenile humpback whale. He might only be 5-6 years old, but he's just here right next to our boat. Obviously loving the encounter with us. Ooh, it's a bit wet there. Just incredible. We've had humpback whales literally within touching distance, sitting right next to the boat. We've had one day where we had 6 adults all around the back of the boat. They were all sticking their heads out and waving their flippers and waving their tails and yeah, really interacting with people. So that's always the most special times I think out there, when the whales are interacting with us and you feel like the whales are people watching just as much as we are whale watching.
Bagged and weighed, it is stored temporarily, the 4 being shipped by barge to the city of Brisbane, where it is ultimately distributed throughout the Commonwealth of Australia.
We believe that we were one of the first companies in Queensland to start whale watching, and it was a little bit ironic because just a few generations before, this was a whaling station.
The reason why they closed down the whaling station in 1962 was simply because they had run out of whales. They did have a season quota to catch 600 whales, but in 1962 they could only catch 68 whales.
So they went broke, and that's basically really why they sold it all up and pulled it all down, because they just went broke. There was not enough whales left to keep it going.
After whaling, they believed there was anywhere from 300 up to 500 whales left. In 1965, they did declare the humpback whale an endangered species, and because of that, their numbers are slowly recovering, and each year they do believe that they are increasing by around about 10% every year.
We didn't really understand what we were doing back then, I suppose. People didn't realise how quickly the whale stocks were declining until it was too late. And, as it turns out, an animal that reproduces so slowly, really there is no way of managing it sustainably or making it sustainable. Everyone agrees that the whales should be protected, except for a few odd countries that do still hunt whales yet today. And some of them actually even hunt some of those species that still have not been able to recover and that are still quite endangered.
I've learned a lot since I've been here. I realise now that what they're actually doing is they're using our past as an example of how we can switch our ways to the future. So other countries that do argue that it's in their traditions, it's what they've always been doing, we can show them here that it was also in our traditions once, but now we've changed and we're still doing fine. So hopefully we can use this as an example to promote conservation as well.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of our marine life these days is doing it quite tough out there. A lot of the species are declining. A lot of our larger animals, like the whales and the dolphins and the sharks, pretty much all of them are in decline. That's due to pollution, overfishing, all these sorts of problems with our oceans these days. So it is important, if we do want these marine animals around, if we do want that wildlife to be around for future generations to enjoy as well, and for our oceans to stay the beautiful places that they still are, we do need to look after them. We can all do our bit. So hopefully things will change in the future, and we are hopeful. Obviously here at Tangalooma we've moved on, and we feel very strongly about the protection of whales these days. We do hope that some of those other species will be able to recover as well.
All humans on the planet have an enormous responsibility, and we need to conserve all life on the planet for future generations. We really haven't done that so well. And to be here at Tangalooma, teaching everyone about whales and dolphins and cetaceans and marine life in general is just fantastic, because we're helping conserve the future.
And so we have the story of subtropical whaling by Australians old and new. A story of tiny chaser ships and their gunners. The lonely little station on Cape Moreton Island. This is the Tangalooma Saga.